Just a second. Hello? Anybody on?
Hey, Allan, this is Kelly Seyarto. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Kelly. How are you?
I'm doing great. I think they have us on mute and video closed right now.
Okay.
And then,
Well, they keep calling my office saying, where are you?
okay,
And I'm watching.
Yeah, if you didn't come on your private Zoom link, I think they'll switch you over. Okay. So just video, go on video, mute, or video off and mute, and then she will switch you over the other way. Okay.
Stop the video.
Stop your video there and then go press mute, and then she will switch you over. She just did to Melissa too. So I think that's how it'll work. Because we're in our 10-minute silent period.
I'm going to mute, so you won't hear me. Thank you, Kelly.
You bet.
Hi, welcome. Hi, Allan.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, good. Gene, can I go ahead and get started here?
Absolutely, we're back. We ready to go? We would start by welcoming everyone to the 2020 Legislative Summit. My name's Gene Wunderlich. It's a great honor for me that I will be acting as your MC and moderator this morning. Today's event will include opening presentation by each of our distinguished panelists, followed by a question and answer session. So if you have questions, please enter it into that little Q&A box that you see at the bottom of your screen. Some of the federal and state topics we plan to discuss today include climate change and wildfires, electric gas cars, AB5 reform and Prop 22, obviously an update on COVID, and potential stimulus packages. But we'd like to begin by thanking our sponsors and our businesses who recognize the importance of events such as this. Our sponsors are vital to the mission and success of this event and have been for a number of years. So we thank our title sponsor today, which is Abbott. Our associate sponsors are Pechanga Resort and Casino and the Southwest Riverside County Association of Realtors. Our community sponsors are Southern California Edison, Southwest Healthcare Systems, and Temecula Valley Hospital. Our corporate sponsors are Eastern Municipal Water District, Promenade Temecula, Rady Children's Health Services. Our media sponsor is the Valley News. And a special thanks, of course, to our corporate sponsor of the City of Temecula. So we will go ahead and start. And again, I'd like to point out that after our panelist presentations, you can submit your own questions by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. And again, that Q&A session will begin right after the opening presentations. We do have a number of questions in place already that have been submitted by a variety of businesses and individuals throughout the community. So hopefully your question will be covered at some point anyway this morning. So we're looking forward to that. Our first speaker this morning currently serves as our California State Senator for District 28. She's a veteran of the U.S. Navy, spent 10 years as a Russian translator. She is our former state assembly member for District 67, is a mother of 5. Please welcome the Honorable Senator Melissa Melendez.
Good morning, Gene. Good morning, everyone. Glad to be with you this morning on this beautiful day. Gene, that looks like that's a great background you have there, buddy. So as far as presentation, I'm just going to start with a few comments because I know we have certain questions that we're going to get to. Today, I anticipate, could be tomorrow, I do anticipate that the governor is going to be making an announcement with respect to another statewide lockdown, or at least for the 41 counties, I believe, that are in this most restrictive purple tier. He mentioned yesterday that he would be making that decision within the next few days. So what we're hearing is he may announce that today. I don't have any inside knowledge in that other than it'll be within the next couple of days. So I just want you to be prepared for that. I'm going to wait for the questions to talk about specific details, and then to tell you that this year, 2020, was a very truncated year as far as legislation, which is good news. We kind of thought that this coming year, 2021, that would be a little different, but it's not shaping up to be that way if we're going to end the year with another lockdown. So I'm not really sure what's going to happen this year. The fewer bills that Sacramento passes, the better for everyone, to be perfectly honest. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. But I will tell you that, we are doing our best to work in a bipartisan fashion to come up with some solutions to some of the issues facing California. It's just very difficult when the focus has been on funding and COVID and everything else is getting pushed aside. So we'll see what the year brings us, but I will assure you that Assemblyman Elect Kelly Seyarto and I will be working hand in hand trying to make sure that this area of the Valley is well taken care of. So thank you for your time this morning. I look forward to your questions.
We appreciate that. Thank you very much, Senator. Our next speaker this morning is Assembly Member Elect Kelly Seyarto. Our second speaker has served as the mayor of the City of Murrieta, is the immediate past president of the Mayors and Council Members Department for the League of California Cities. He successfully ran for the 67th Assembly District this past November 3rd, and is now, of course, the Assembly Member elect and will be sworn in next week. Please welcome Kelly Seyarto.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to this great event. I've been out in the audience for this a few times. I haven't been in the hot seat yet, so I'm glad to be doing that. And as Gene mentioned, I am not the Assembly member yet. I am the Assembly member elect until next Monday when they take us in for the swearing in. That's right. I don't get sworn at until after that, but at the swearing in ceremony that comes on Monday, if we don't get locked down and can't go into the plane and get up there. So, there's still 2,000 provisional ballots out there and 1,000 mail-in ballots. So they won't be certifying the election for another few days yet. And I've already been up to Sacramento a couple of times for orientation and training. And so far, I've learned that we're not supposed to use common sense. And so we're going to try to, we're going to go back for more training after the 7th here. So they're being very cautious in Sacramento about COVID, and they should be cautious. The Capitol doesn't look like its normal self. It's empty. And but there is still business going on trying to get organized for this coming year. And so we just have to realize that they're going to be operating kind of not as usual, like Senator Melendez has just said. I anticipate a lot of focus on, of course, this COVID issue and pandemic relief and how we manage it, not just now, but also going into the future. Also, they're going to continue to talk about small business relief. What I've been hearing a lot is we're going to defer, which means at the end of the day, the businesses will be on the hook to pay up and catch up, which I don't know if that helps them a lot. So I haven't heard anything about curbing regulations that are killing our small businesses, and I'd like to hear a lot more about that. We'll also be talking about wildfire mitigation, bills aimed at social justice. I think that's going to be a hot topic for everybody up there. They want to talk about policing. They want to talk about climate change. They want to talk about a lot of things. But what we really need to do is reestablish a stable base for California in light of the damage that's been done with COVID. We also need to address some of the the shortcomings as for our state agencies like DMV and EDD. And the only place, I guess the good place to get your relief checks is to go over to the prison and have them allocate some of the money that they got back to us. So I'm also going to be bringing on some key staff in the next couple of weeks here, and the office is going to be up and running on December 7th. And so it'll be in the same office that Senator Melendez had previously on Calmia in Suite 220. And so I look forward to getting with everybody and exploring some of their solutions to these issues so that we can take your voice up there, and the senator and I will be working very, very hard on your behalf to let your voices be heard up there. So thanks again for having me this morning, and I look forward to our question and answering session.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Our third speaker this morning is President and Chief Executive Officer of the California Chamber of Commerce. He has served as the head of the California Chamber's advocacy program and on a number of public policy boards and commissions geared toward improving the California economy. Please welcome Allan Zaremberg. Mr. Zaremberg.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Gene, and good morning, Senator. And Kelly, welcome to Sacramento. I think we look forward to having more voices like yours in Sacramento that are pro-business voices. As we deal with this COVID issue, we certainly have, I think, most importantly, to smaller businesses that are involved in Temecula Chamber of Commerce, is that you need personal interaction, you need personal involvement. When you're our industry that has been most damaged by COVID is our hospitality and tourism business. And when that's your business, then you suffer dramatically. And for those companies that can do business online, can do business at home in offices, those businesses are doing well. And so we have a real split here in California of who's impacted, who's affected. So the senator mentioned that the governor was most likely going to do some kind of stay-at-home order, lockdown, close the businesses. We're not exactly sure what it's going to be yet. And she was right to prepare everybody. I think the dilemma here is for the administration, for the government that's in charge here, is that they're using every tool in their toolbox. They don't know what else to do. And what's driving their metrics right now is capacity in hospitals. So I think what we'll see is probably where the most severe lockdowns will come, where the most severe capacity crisis is in a local hospital or a regional area of hospitals to deal with that. And when I said there's very little things left in their toolbox, and I think that's in their opinion, there are things we need to look at, and we need to, so in terms of if the criteria is we don't have enough capacity in our hospitals, can we suspend, like we suspended some other rules, nurse staffing ratios for the next few weeks so we can free up more beds? The nurses, we can't import nurses from other parts of the country because other states have the same problem. But that is exactly one of the things where we need to look at options. We need to look at alternatives. And, Kelly mentioned correctly, what can you do for small business? I think, well, what can you do for any business? And I think the hospitality business is, if you depend on conferences, on socialization, this probably isn't going to be solved until we get a vaccine. But for other people that are in the business arena, if you if you can be safe, if your customers feel safe, and I think that's really the important aspect, will they feel safe when they can attend your place of business? So we have to find ways to create opportunity for those people. And I think we've seen a lot of discussion about equity. You know, who is hurt the worst? And the people that don't have jobs are hurt the worst. There's a couple things that are on the horizon. And I think because of the huge unemployment insurance drawdown we've seen, over $20 billion we borrowed from the federal government. Who has to pay that back? After the last fiscal crisis in 2009, businesses had to pay that back. Took over 10 years of increased unemployment insurance taxes. The state has a little surplus. Maybe we can direct some of that surplus to paying down the debt. So businesses, when they do get back, don't have to be responsible for paying down that $20+ billion debt that we have in our unemployment insurance fund. So I think there's a lot of things that we can work on. It's as Kelly's going to find out, and the senator knows all too well, that not everybody shares the pro-business attitude that the people in your valley do, and we need to make sure that they understand that what it takes to thrive in a business arena is what you practice down there. And I say that from down there, from being up here in Sacramento, outside of Sacramento where I live. But it's an important aspect to be able to show people how good your economy can be if you remove the barriers and allow people to be entrepreneurs. So happy to be involved here. Happy to take any questions about what we think is going to happen. And thanks for having me.
Thank you, Allan. Very well stated. So let's go ahead and continue along that line then, discussing the obvious elephant in the room, the coronavirus pandemic. It's been estimated that some 30 to 40% of our businesses will close permanently, with the lion's share of those being small, locally owned businesses. And of course, that's before the anticipated announcement of additional closes and projected lockdown. And as Allan mentioned, that's largely impacting our hospitality industry, our restaurants, our malls, theaters, wineries, and more are suffering under a threat of permanent closure. So what additional things can we bring to the table? I know Senator Melendez, you post weekly updates on the impact, the number of positive cases, the hospitalization rate, which certainly in our area is only about 25%, both in hospitalizations and ICU, which partly seems to justify the degree of lockdown that we're even currently under, let alone taking it to the next step. But let's go ahead and start with Senator Melendez. What additional steps do you propose, or how can we address this without putting all of our businesses out of business?
Oh boy, that's a whopper of a question, Gene. You know, my preference would be that the governor allows counties to make their own decisions about how their economies open or slow down a bit. I think that light is really, sorry about that. The sun will keep rising in a second, then it won't look like I'm an angel sitting in front of you. You know, I had a bill, it was SCR 93, which would have allowed locals to, you know, make their own decisions. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get that through the, through the legislature. So I don't know what we're going to be able to get the governor to sign off on, because right now he's the one in charge. He has all the power. The legislature's not back in session until January. So he could make an awful lot of decisions affecting our economy between now and then. So I would say that though it may fall on deaf ears, I think local elected officials and constituents too, you know, contacting the governor's office and saying, look, we really we want control back of our local economies. We will make the best decisions, we can, based on the numbers in the hospitals, based on, what's going on in our communities. I think that's the best way forward, because what we see right now is, good Lord, is, for instance, LA County, their mayor decided, okay, we're going to shut down all restaurants and a few other businesses. So the people in LA will do what? They'll go to a neighboring county. So I don't know that this whack-a-mole that they're playing with locking down counties is necessarily working. And every county and local elected official obviously wants to keep their constituents healthy. So I can't tell you what's down the road, to be honest with you, other than a lockdown. Another one surely is imminent. And I think we need to all be prepared for that. And I think we all need to be prepared also for some protesting, some very angry business people and just regular old average people who are not going to be happy with the state going into another lockdown mode.
Thank you. Kelly, you have anything to add to that?
Sure, I have to unmute myself first. So Melissa's right, this is a huge issue. And one of the problems with this issue is that, when this pandemic started, it was in a horrendously political environment. And you don't solve problems like this, or you don't approach problems like this and get the trust and cooperation of the public by having a single person making decisions, imposing things on people. People were given bad information. People were given, told one thing, and then they see different things going on that lead them not to believe what they're being told. And I don't blame them one bit. One thing we can, I think we need to acknowledge is that there is certainly a surge in these cases, and a lot of people don't die from this. And, we know what those statistics are. But the people that do get this, some of them suffer mightily while they have it. And so those, people need to know what this is, how it works, what it does to their body, and some of the things they can do to protect themselves. And we need to move from a more of a dictator dictating what we should do and mandates thing to more of an update and collaborative approach with some of the leaders in the state, so that we come up with policies and a direction for our communities that they can buy into and not have things mandated on. One thing I don't believe is going to be helpful is a full shutdown like this. I've been to, when they had the gyms reopen, I've gone to the gym. I had gone to the gym several times. There wasn't a case that came out of the gyms that I was going to. And so they shut those down immediately again. And guess what? A lot of people are getting out of shape. They're getting in worse shape to be able to handle, for their bodies to handle things like this. And so those shutdowns aren't working. A lot of our smaller businesses, they don't have the volume of people coming in and out of their stores that would, is uncontrollable as far as being able to take the precautions people need to take. So I think this effort was lost at the very beginning, and it's going to be very hard to regain that. But in order to regain that, I think we need to have a coalition of legislators and the governor and, small businesses, the people that are involved in this, and talk about how we can approach this differently to get more cooperation from the public to do just the basic things that they need to do to protect themselves. Because if you laid out all the stuff for it, you would see that people really don't want to be sick like this. They don't even want the flu. And if we can do some things on our own to make sure that that doesn't happen, I think we'd be in better shape. Gene, you mentioned the hospital COVID numbers and stuff. And while it's true, the COVID number is a quarter of what's going on in the hospital, there was another number that I saw was a little bit alarming, and that was that the ICU bed use was actually approaching 75%. The COVID was only 25%, but there's other people sick in ICUs that take up some of that other bed space. So by my math that I saw, it looked like we had like 93 left in ICU. But I think Allan had mentioned some things that we can do to help that situation too. So, I think most of the damage has been done because of the single person making decisions and the public completely losing trust. We have to regain the trust of the public if we're going to make this go away.
Thank you, Kelly. Allan, you mentioned a number of things in your opening remarks. The state just apparently found an additional $26 billion in their coffers, unexpected. Knowing that this seems to be impacting your constituency, the businesses in the state of California, the hardest, what do you see as additional steps that we can take? And do you think there's a chance that that $26 billion in unanticipated revenue can be put to good use, helping our businesses, or will they just go ahead and fritter that away on the bullet train and whatever else is out there?
Who do you want?
Well, there'll be
Let Allan
56.
go.
Yeah, okay. There may be $25 billion in newfound money, but there'll be $50 billion in good ideas on how to spend it. So, that's exactly why there's, what we're about here is trying to find the best way to allocate things like that, and whether or not it's going to continue. I think we do need to work more closely with the federal government on providing relief. The state, notwithstanding the fact that I'm going to get into in a minute here, why we have some extra revenues. And I think this is part of the disparity that exists in our state. And I would suggest that I use the word disparity there, but in other respects, diversity of our businesses really makes a difference in terms of being able to overcome recessions in difficult times like this, because we have a strong manufacturing base, but also a very strong tourism base and hospitality base. And certainly technology, the tech sector is what's helping to drive, our good revenue numbers in the state. So for people who are, for every person who's in the hospitality business, there's a Zoom whose market cap is up 400% this year. A number of companies like that are benefiting from the fact that people are working from home, the fact that we're doing this virtually rather than me being down in Temecula like I've been in the past. This is, there are people who are doing well because of this, exactly because of this, and that's helped California's revenue numbers. In the end, though, I think there's only so much that the state can do to long-term provide that kind of relief, and that comes from the federal government. And we saw that in the PPP program, which probably was not well named, but regardless of that, if we can get another tranche of money from the federal government who can go into deficit spending, unlike the state, and have it applied directly to small business, and have those businesses be able to sustain their workforce, then we've solved not just the entrepreneur and small business problem, but we've also solved the unemployment problem. So it's kind of interesting. I think when we look back, what drove the governor in his various decisions throughout the last 6 months, and when he opened up, because as Senator Melendez points out, that the legislature was out of session for a while, and he was clearly in charge. And I'm not sure the leadership in the legislature really wanted to be in charge. You make good decisions and bad decisions, and it was easier to defer to him for a lot of things. And I'll get to a perspective here that I think we all need to be careful of as we go forward as a business person. But I think the governor realized that the unemployment, the $600 a month, was going to go away at the end of August, and felt, well, we better get people back to work. And then not just here, but in other parts of the country, we had a surge, and then he reeled back in. And, he got some negative publicity. And so for better or for worse, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I think it's just that has something a little bit to do with, how you are cautious and moving forward. I think what's going to drive where we go the rest of this year is going to depend on the hospital capacity, the ability to deal with your issues in your community. And I think that's probably what's going to be important in terms of whether or not your region will have, further lockdowns. If we have federal money where they can deficit spend, not only can we forgive possibly the unemployment insurance borrowing from the federal government, but we can also direct money directly to small businesses that apply for that and forgive that as they hopefully they will do in the PPP program. But we don't have to worry about the unemployment insurance because those people will keep their people employed. I think what's important is everybody knows, those companies those businesses that rely on in-person business, they're the ones that are going to suffer. People are still going to buy their Christmas gifts, but they're going to do it online. And those are the companies that are going to benefit from this. And the economy may still do okay in the long run, but those businesses, as long as those people in hospitality are going to suffer. And that's where we need to focus some of our efforts on being able to say, we need you to stay in business because you employ people. You have your own family to take care of, but you have another 25 families that you support. So that's where we need, and we really need, I'm hopeful that we can see an additional tranche of money. Two hangups on the federal level. One was that the states needed additional money. And of course, in California, when that started, that drumbeat started in the summer, we thought we were going to have a huge deficit, which we don't have. The second thing is that the unemployment insurance at $600 a week. So I do a lot of calls with other business associations from throughout the country. And even during the summer, they were complaining mightily that they couldn't, in other states, get people go back to work who were collecting $2,400 a month on top of the regular unemployment insurance. And they strongly said, we don't want to do that again. And their US senators were strongly opposed to providing those additional unemployment insurance benefits. And so I think that time has passed. I think what we'll see now is some unemployment insurance benefits, but we'll also we need to see from the federal government who can do deficit spending. We need to see some money that goes directly to businesses, small businesses that are able to support their workforce. And I think those are some of the things we need to focus on. I think a lot of larger businesses that are essential businesses, there's some new regulations, unfortunately, that are going into effect for OSHA, that are putting into effect that everybody has to, whether it is more testing or too much testing. When I say too much testing, not because we don't want the results, because there aren't enough tests to be able to get the results back quickly, but also the people who will get paid if they stay home, if they practice, if in one of the counties in Northern California, if you drive more than 150 miles from your county, you have to quarantine for 14 days afterwards. Well, under the new regulations that OSHA has, do we have to pay those people because are we encouraging them to take trips so their employer will pay them when they come back and they have to quarantine for 14 days? These are the things that we need, just don't make any sense. We need to focus on controlling the spread of the virus. And then we also need to focus on lifting our businesses up and making sure that they can continue to employ their workers. That's what's important. And I think the frustrating part, I think, for all the people in your community is we have people who want to work, who want to be safe. I think Kelly's absolutely right. The people that suffer the consequences from the virus, we don't want that to happen to anybody. And the small businesses in your community, as well as throughout the state, should be people that are spokespeople to say, follow the rules, practice the protocols, be careful. We don't want you to force us to shut down.
Thank you, Allan. Of course, coronavirus is the main headline grabber these days, but California does face some additional challenges in other areas. So we'll start with the power grid. The governor and the legislature are pushing to get all of our housing, commercial properties, and automobiles now electrified by 2035 or so, increasing demand exponentially. Meanwhile, our current grid is failing. We suffer brownouts and shutdowns for a variety of reasons, and little to no additional supplies being built. This past session, efforts to get nuclear and hydroelectric power included as renewable resources didn't even get a hearing. So all of you now, and we'll start this response with Kelly, but please put your most optimistic spin on how we address this growing delta between supply and demand in the power grid over the next decade.
All right, well, I'll start with my optimistic statement, just like Senator Melendez did the last time, was, that is a very difficult question, because the answer is not a simple answer. One of it is to change the mindset of the energy, I guess the energy question. A lot of times what we're seeing right now is a lot of ideas that are not necessarily terrible ideas, but the timeline in which they think we're going to make a cultural shift from one thing to another thing is very unrealistic. I am very much a balanced energy person. I think there's room for our gas industries and our electrical energy companies, because if we're going to be dependent on one, that means we'll fail with one, and that failure is economic failure, it's social failure, it's everything. And so, really, if we have better ideas and about how to leave a smaller footprint, and people that want to, climate change is the big thing that they want to address. There are ways of that occurring, but the timeline in which it's going to occur can't be, 15 years and we're going to get rid of all the gas cars, because that will destroy economies, that'll destroy people's lives. And at the end of the day, my concern is that, the people like my family, my neighbors, the people that we represent, it's their lives that are affected by this. And although something may sound really good, it's not realistic. And when you pile on mandates, and then you pile on fines, and those fines start taking money out of small businesses, out of communities, and into the coffers of the state to keep doing what they're doing, that is a formula for that, to me, that's a disaster waiting to happen. So that's, I think what we have to do is come up with better, more realistic expectations on how to tackle these problems. When I was a kid growing up, the smog issues were awful. The air quality was terrible. I grew up in the Pomona Walnut Valley, and there were days I lived 5 miles from the hills. I couldn't even see the hills. Well, they've done a lot of things that have cleaned up the air, and we're doing really well. And yet, now we want to electrify entire California in our bubble, but that's not going to be a bubble that affects the rest of the world very much. It's only going to affect us as the citizens that live here. And if that's going to be our approach, we're going to pay the price. Like I said, economically and socially, we're going to pay the price for making a statement that isn't effective. So we really need to I think, temper our efforts to make everything happen all at once. And I think in the long term, if we put too much stress, we're not going to be able to meet the electrical demands of what they envision in 15 years if they don't start looking at some of these other options for providing electricity, and including, getting rid of natural gas. that's just not, I think that's just not feasible. And I think it would be terribly harmful to the regular citizens that live out there in employment and all of those other things. And so we can't be so extreme when we're trying to, promote things like that. And so, I'm in favor of the balanced energy, and I'd like to see some of these other issues fully explored and not shut down before they're even explored. And that's what we're doing. We're shutting it down because we don't even want to explore it. So, I think that's the best answer I can come up with right now for what we face. It's an attitude shift, and that takes a lot of working with other people and having them understand what our constituents, what the future looks like under their plan, because to me, it doesn't look very good.
Thank you, Kelly. Allan, your thoughts on the power grid?
Okay, great. I think we have to, consider the public's diversity, and I'm so glad, in terms of how they view these things. But I'm also glad that Kelly and Senator Melendez are on today, because, this is these proposals. So the governor did two proposals. One dealt with upstream, which is how you extract oil out of the ground in California. And California, most people don't know this, produces roughly a 30%, almost a third of our own petroleum that we use in Los Angeles and in Kern County and Bakersfield. We extract the oil and we refine that here in California. That was one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it is, as Kelly talked about, was the downstream, or the use of it by the consumer. We need to get rid of our combustion engine cars in it's not 15, 14 years by now. And I would encourage, I think these are things that the downstream that, in terms of a ban on combustion engine cars, is going to be accomplished by the California Air Resources Board. At least this is under the governor's proposal. I think it's really crucial that the legislature engage in this. These are things that, as Kelly talked about, these affect your constituents, your consumers, the people that live in your community. The legislature should be involved in making sure that these rules reflect what the people want, what the people need, and what the people have to have to be able to live their life as they know it. To be able to have a light duty Ford F-150 or a Chevy truck, to be able to do your construction work. We have to make sure those are still on the road and are useful to people. We have to do that. And I think it's really important that the legislature engage in this, Republicans and Democrats alike, because we know from our research that, the public supports climate change. They support dealing with it. They support making sure that we try to do something. But when it costs you money, then they have second thoughts about it. Just like taxes. Taxing somebody else is okay, but when you tax them, they're concerned about that. Republican or Democrat alike, they're very concerned about that. And when you point out how your lifestyle is going to change, how your costs are going to go up, how it isn't practical, that's really where the impact and the influence comes with the people that are going to be impacted by that. Now you have people, this is one of the dilemmas here, is that, there are certain people that make money off of electrification. They're in that business. They support more people having electricity. And then, we have companies that make money off of, providing natural gas. So, the question becomes for the legislature, and I think it's really important to be involved, to make those decisions, to weigh the things, to take testimony from individuals, not to let some obscure government agency make these decisions without input from the community, business community or consumers alike, to how it's going to impact their lives, and have the legislature get involved and say, we need to set the rules here. We need to hear, we need to take testimony. We need to know what the consequences are. And I think you brought up who's the Air Resources Board is not in charge of, the electrification, the grid. Somebody's got to have to deal with that. What are the consequences to that? What are the consequences to dealing with wildfires? These are things, and shutdowns. These are things that require involvement by our legislature, and not to let just one regulatory body that's not elected make these decisions that affect people's lives. So I encourage both the Senator and Kelly to be engaged in this in the future, because this is where it belongs, Democrats and Republicans alike.
Thank you, Allan. Senator, the last word on this power grid issue is up to you.
Okay, well, Allan and Kelly hit a lot of very important points. What I will add to the conversation is that fossil fuels, natural gas are reliable and they are abundant, and there is no reason why we should abandon them, despite the cries we hear from the environmental sector that we should. We need them, and there can be a place for them within our economy. I think the only wake-up call that the legislature is going to pay attention to is when revenues start to fall from businesses leaving the state of California and people leaving the state of California, because it's too expensive to live here because of the high energy costs. And we are already starting to see that. But we have in the legislature an environmental sect, if you will, that very much believes that we should get rid of all fossil fuels and natural gas and everything else, and that everything can be run on windmills and solar panels. And that's just not reality. It's just not. When we need the energy the most, that's when it's not being produced. So I'm not sure how the governor thinks that we're going to power the entire state of California and all its 40 million inhabitants and their vehicles and everything else and their businesses on alternative energy. I'm not opposed to incorporating that into our portfolio, but we cannot rely on that solely, which is exactly what the governor has stated he would like to do. In fact, we had a bill, as you recall, when one member, Senator De Leon, was in the Senate, that requires us to go 100% alternative energy in the not so distant future. And that's going to be very, very, very expensive. So I think Allan is right to point out that the legislature, Republicans and Democrats alike, have to be engaged in this. The hurdle, though, is going to be changing the hearts and minds of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, which very much believes in this cause, because they have very powerful allies. They have very vocal allies. And as you know, climate change is like the word of the day every day in California. And they've done a very good job of convincing people that Earth as we know it is going to end if we don't all convert to alternative energy. Not realizing, of course, what that's going to do to their bottom line. So we will engage at every opportunity that we have. But again, the problem, I think, and I'm just being candid with you here, is that there are too many members of the legislature who are part of this kind of environmental group that firmly believe in this, and it's nearly impossible to change their minds. And it's nearly impossible to get them out of office, because there are a lot of environmental groups out there who are more than willing to fund them and keep them in office. So I think it's just going to take persistence on our part, and really we're going to have to deal in facts and numbers that will speak to them, I hope. When you look at, I think I want to say Allan might know this better than I might have a more recent number, but I want to say it's about 4 million people maybe that have left the state in the past decade. It may be a little less than that, but it's not, we still have a lot of people in California, but given all the laws that they are passing, I think more and more people are looking to other states where it's a little cheaper to live. So, we will see what happens in the next decade. But, by the time all of your high earners, or at least middle income earners, leave the state, and you realize that it's kind of too late. And this year we had a $54 billion shortfall in the budget because of the pandemic. But that just goes to show you, what can happen when the economy suddenly turns and the legislature doesn't want to cut the things that they have agreed to spend money on that maybe some other states might consider luxuries, where we have a sector of the legislature who finds them to be necessary. So this is not going to be easy. I don't want to give people the impression that this is going to be simple, because it is not. I mean, if it were easy, we wouldn't have seen a bill get through the legislature and be signed by the governor that says we're going to go to 100% renewable energy in just the very near future.
Thank you, Senator. The next, move on to the next topic, which is water, which is another major concern for the state of California. We have had a couple of rainy years, so the drought has kind of taken a backseat to some of the other issues. However, we are really just one dry winter away from more rationing and higher costs, and it appears that nothing's being done to add additional storage capacity to help offset those dry times. So if you could give us a quick update on what the current status is of the California Water Fix or Conveyance Project or whatever is currently being called, and add on to that, does the Delta smelt really taste like sardines, only worse? We'll start this answer with Mr. Zaremberg.
Oh, thanks, Gene. Solve the world's problems here today. It's ironic because California, to me, it's like the blood that keeps us all alive, and water is the analogy for California. Without water, we can't thrive and we can't survive. Right now, here we are at the beginning of December, and in Northern California, we're already about 26% of normal water precipitation this year already. November was a bust. There's no rain on the horizon for the next 2 weeks here. So when you bring this topic up, you would bring it up even if there was a lot of rain out there, but it's probably even more relevant today because it could be that we're facing another dry year. And, how do we deal with that? How do we make sure that people have that kind of the lifeblood of California to be able to survive? Let me get a drink here, excuse me. There is one reservoir in Northern California called the Sites Reservoir that's been, the people up there have been working on that for 20 years. They're very close to being able to have an additional off-stream storage facility. But one of the keys is to be able to, as you pointed out, you brought up the issues with water conveyance, is to be able to get it through the Delta. It doesn't do any good to have additional water here in Northern California if we can't get it to where people need it, whether it be for agriculture in the Central Valley or for your agriculture or your quality of life, your jobs in Southern California. Right now, far too much of the water, when we do have it available, doesn't get to where it's needed in California and goes out in the ocean. I know that the governor has said that he supports putting a tunnel in, but the question is, will the tunnel provide additional water conveyance to Southern California? And I think that's one of the key issues. And the funder for that is going to be the Metropolitan Water District in Southern California is going to be the key funder. And the key impact is they're pretty upset right now that the rules that the administration has imposed on the Delta Conveyance Facility means that it won't get built, or if it does, it won't be adequate to really do any good. So I think this issue is far from being resolved, notwithstanding the fact that Jerry Brown, I have to say this, Jerry Brown, when he was governor the first time, proposed the peripheral canal to be able to better deliver water to Southern California in the Central Valley. Moved away from that the second time and said, well, let's do tunnels underneath the Delta instead. But at the same time indicated that we need a conveyance facility to ensure water delivery to Southern California. And even as he, and I think, whether it be on energy or whether it be on water, Senator Melendez was very accurate to point out that there are people who wake up every day that want people to move out of California, that don't want us to have adequate energy supplies, and don't want Southern California to have water, because that means you'll have more development, more growth, more businesses. This is a persistent issue that we need to stay on top of. We need to pursue. We need to be able to expand the conveyance facility underneath the Delta. And unfortunately, to get people's attention, and I think during the Schwarzenegger years is when we had, when the drought started, people started to pay attention. And when you have a shortage, which is a crisis, is when you get people to act. But, you can't go out and build a conveyance facility we have a drought this year and we'll get it done by next year. That isn't the way it works. And we have to have that vision and that foresight. And this is something that really, if people, regardless in Southern California, where, whether you're Democrat or Republican, we have to be able to make sure that we continue to pound on that drum, that we need to protect the water conveyance facilities that we have and be able to deliver water to Southern California. It's so crucial. I'm glad you brought it up. I can't say I see an answer on the horizon, but we do have one storage facility here that could provide additional water if we can get it there. And everybody has to stay on top of this. And, this is not a 1 year, a 10-year, it's a 50-year issue that we all have to pay attention to. And I think the people in the Southern California region, regardless of whether they're in your area or in downtown Los Angeles, whatever party you are, you can't live without the water. And we need to make sure that is where we spend our infrastructure money, on being able to make sure that you sustain the water delivery system. So I'm glad you brought it up, and we need to remind everybody to stay on top of that. Don't ignore it just because it might rain one year, which it's not doing this year, is to be able to be very aware of that and pay attention to it.
Thank you. Senator Melendez, your thoughts on the water issue?
Well, Gene, I think you will appreciate this comment, but as the saying goes, whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting over. And we've had lots of fights over water in the legislature. And, Allan touched on the Sites Reservoir, which is the only project currently moving. That'll provide about 1.5 million acre feet of water. But he's right. It's not, you make the decision today, okay, we're going to increase capacity, and then next year it's done. It takes a lot of time. There's a tremendous amount of environmental review that takes place. There's all sorts of legal challenges, as Governor Brown discovered very quickly. And then we have the added problem of, because this is a project that takes so long, you have a change of leadership in the governor's office. And so when a new governor comes in, does he or she make changes to the vision? And I think it's something that Californians have to be solidly behind, and then hold their elected officials accountable to say, no, this was the plan and this is how we want you to move forward. But yeah, look how long we were in a drought, and people got it. People understood. They were not happy about it. But then their expectation was, okay, legislature, do something about it. And we still don't have this added capacity. And it's very difficult for people to understand, myself included, as to, why it's taken this long, because I think we've been talking about this for, I don't know how many decades in California. It's been a very long time. And water is life in California, as it is in every other state. And people are right to expect that we do something about it. The question is, is the next governor going to make changes to this, or are we just going to keep dithering along and talking about how much we need the capacity and not actually do something? And I think part of that equation is getting the environmental groups in check, so that they are on board with making sure that Californians have access to water when they turn their faucet on, as opposed to putting all of these environmental policies in place and arguing about whether or not we need the capacity or should spend the money on the capacity, because it's about the site's reservoir, I think, is a little over $5 billion in cost, which is a lot of money. But again, Californians are willing to give that money, but they want to get something in return for it, and they're a little tired of waiting around, as am I. So I think this is another one that kind of goes in line with the energy issue, that this is really going to fall on the people of California to hold their elected officials responsible for following through on this, and not just continuing to talk about it, but actually, move forward on the project and make sure that it gets done.
Thank you. Assembly Member Elect Seyarto, last words on the water issue.
Thank you. And I think everybody's made really good points on this. I'm not going to reiterate those points. I'm going to take it from a little different perspective, because it kind of covers all of our issues in California. Our system of government was built around the notion that we have checks and balances. We don't have checks and balances right now. And, when you have 75% of the legislature is on one side and 25 on the other, and the same thing in the Senate, and you have a governor that is aligned with those 75%ers, you are not going to have a check or a balance in dealing with these issues. This water issue, this was an issue when I came on the city council in 1997. All it takes to punt, if you come into office as governor, is to change it from, say, 2 tunnels to 1 tunnel, throw it back into the environmental community or environmental process, study process, and you won't have to deal with it during your term as governor. And because it'll take that long for it to get through the environmentals again. This is all about storage capacity and distribution. And they've come up with a plan. They've had the plan. It keeps being adjusted so that it goes back into the environmental plan or environmental study plan. And we just don't get it done. And that's, if we had checks and balances, if we had a more balanced legislature, we had a governor that was concerned about solving these problems, as opposed to being on one side or the other, we would solve problems like this. I would be more than happy to take $5 billion from the bullet train and put it into the water, into the site's reservoir and the water project itself to solve that. Because if we don't solve the water issue in California, I don't care how many trains you have running from Bakersfield to the Bay Area, we're in trouble, and we're not going to survive economically from an economic perspective. It's going to be a real detriment to the people that we serve. And we serve those people that live in all different areas, whether they're red or blue. And so that's a big concern. And I think that really kind of sums up why we have problems in California, is this imbalance that we have. There are no checks and balances. Thanks.
Thank you. So one more issue that I'll ask you all to address that really impacts the state of California. And you've talked about people leaving and lack of affordability and access to water and power and so forth. But the other thing that impacts everybody here is housing, something near and dear to my heart. That remains a major concern for most of the state, as our inventory of homes for sale drops from months to weeks, and prices continue to climb, reducing affordability for homeowners and renters alike. There was a plethora of housing bills introduced again last session to increase the supply of housing, but many of them chose to do so in the typical Sacramento one-size-fits-all approach. Most of these bills were aimed at increasing density, including a Pro Tem Atkins bill to allow duplex and multifamily to be built on single-family home neighborhoods, and many of these override local control issues to accomplish these mandates. How can our local cities make our voices heard when it comes to local control issues? And what can we do realistically to increase the supply of housing, and particularly affordable workforce housing for our teachers, for our firefighters, for our veterans, and for our children in this state? And I'll start the answers to this one with Mr. Zaremberg.
I think, Gene, I think we look at all these things and, these are all difficult issues. They're not irresolvable, but this is one issue that, is not necessarily Mother Nature like water is in wildfires. This is an issue that we have created and we perpetuate because we don't let communities that want to build housing in their community build that housing. And it comes back once again to people who don't want any growth in California, don't want to provide affordable housing. People who have suggested on one side of the equation that we need more equity, but on the other side of the equation won't do anything to provide affordable housing for them. It's pretty clear that the Environmental Quality Act, the California Environmental Quality Act, is abused. It's abused to prohibit housing within those communities. I don't necessarily think that we need the state of California to impose on your community or Huntington Beach or wherever to do things that they don't want to do. If we would just let those communities that do want to build housing, build that housing, then we will go a long way towards resolving these issues. And I think that's really, and people who don't want any growth in those communities take advantage of CEQA, and they use it and they delay things, and things that take a year from investment to construction in Texas, a year, take more than 10 years here in California. And, you want to know what kind of return you're going to get on your investment when you put $1 down. And when that's unknown, you're unlikely to invest in housing. And so, if you knew you could get a return on that investment, you're more likely to say, I'm going to invest, I'm going to put capital into housing. And when you don't know that, we have a lack of capitalization. And then most importantly, that's because people can't accomplish those communities that do want to expand their housing supply are unable to do so because of CEQA. And we need to change that. That's been known for many years, and that's the problem.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Kelly, any comments on housing?
None at all, Gene. No.
All right.
Actually, this is going to be a big issue because there's the mindset that if you demand that they build housing in a community, that somebody is going to pop up, build houses for more than it costs, for more than you want them to sell it for, and somehow they're just going to flock to the community and do that. They're not. And that's the problem, is we've created so many regulations and a lot of these, the costs for building a home, when you add in CEQA lawsuits and all of the other costs that come in, the mitigation fees, which, the reason we have mitigation fees is because the cities aren't given the money to be able to build the infrastructure that they need from the existing taxes that we pay. And that all goes, a lot of that goes to the state. And so the notion of, hey, new development pays its way, that's great, except for we make even that more expensive with a lot of the regulations that we impose on employment and what we allow people to employ and stuff. So there's a lot of things that go into the basket of making it very, very expensive to just build a house, much less afford the land that it's built on. And nobody wants to address that part of it. Well, if they're not going to address that part of it, they might as well just stop talking about it. This notion of hey, let's just allow single family dwellings to be able to turn into duplexes and triplexes on properties. Well, they need to go to some of the older cities that have been established for a long time, the ones that they complain that are too dense and have too many people that are not able to get employment. Because, there's cities that I've worked in where you can't even get the fire truck down the middle of the road because you have 3 or 4 families in an area that's actually built for one family. And so the amount of cars and other things that are in that community, they're just lining the streets. So there's so many issues that come up with this overpopulating smaller areas that, you know, they're just going to create more problems than we have now. They have to address the issue of how much it costs. And if they don't do that, we might as well move on to the next problem, because we're not going to be able to increase the amount. You can't force a builder to build a house that they have to sell for less than it costs for them to build. That's just not how it works. And I don't care who it is that's coming up with some of these bills. They need to come to grips with that part of it. But all of the focus seems to be on forcing cities to accept or having people pay out. I'm getting an echo, so I'm going to end my comments with that and let them fix that echo.
Thank you, Kelly. Senator Melendez, you've been in Sacramento for a number of years now, and we still have an issue with the housing shortage. What do you do to resolve it?
Well, so a couple things. Number one, CEQA reform. We have tried and tried and tried to achieve CEQA reform with no success. Labor and the environmental attorneys want none of it because it benefits them. So they have a stronghold on a significant portion of the legislature. We have not been able to get CEQA reform through. Secondly, the legislature, when I say the legislature, I mean the majority party, for as much as they talk about increasing housing stocking, making sure that there's more affordable housing, they are not serious about it. It is all talk and no action. And I say that because just this year alone is evidence, given the number of housing bills, creative, housing bills that were put forward, and virtually none of them passed. Okay, that tells you they're not serious. It's a lot of talk, but there's no follow through. And until the makeup of the legislature change, where you do have people willing to stick their necks out and go against some of these powerful forces that are working against them, until you have people in the legislature willing to do that, we aren't going to see change. Recall that when the governor was running for office, he said he was going to make sure we had 3.5 million homes built within just a couple of years. Clearly that did not happen. And that can't be blamed on the pandemic, because the pandemic is just from this year. So we've had ample time to address this issue. The problem is they are not serious about it. And I cannot tell you why that is. I can't tell you if that's because of what Allan spoke of, which are these groups that really would prefer people move out of California, that we have too many. I mean, remember, we have groups who think that you shouldn't, no family should have more than one child, or nobody should be having kids at all because the earth is overpopulated and we're doing a great disservice. I mean, there's a wide variety of opinions on this issue with respect to, those who are against building more housing, and frankly, who are against having more people. But this will never change unless the makeup of the legislature change, or at least the type of, mindset of the legislators who are in Sacramento, understanding that the housing fairy isn't going to drop from the sky and drop homes everywhere that people can afford to live in. And we have so many people who would love to purchase a home, who would love to have a stake in America, but can't afford it. The average price of a home in California is now about $700,000. That is way out of reach for most Californians, way out of reach. And so they will continue to be renters. And when you exist in an environment where your renters outnumber the number of people who own homes, you really start to see a shift in policy coming out of Sacramento with respect to housing. And that is something that we simply cannot afford, because that means we will never realize this dream of making sure that there's enough housing stock for everybody to take advantage of. So, the locals really have to hit this hard. The advocacy is very important, and not just from city council members and county supervisors, but your constituencies really have to get vocal and loud about this and really cause a big fuss and a big stink about it, because if you don't, things are going to continue as usual.
Thank you, Senator. We will follow up. I do have some individual questions right now, and we'll start with one for Senator Melendez. Early last session, you and Assemblymember Kiley introduced AB 1928, a bill which essentially sought to repeal AB 5. Unfortunately, that went nowhere. However, with all the exceptions that were passed in the last session and the voters overwhelmingly rejecting Prop 22, is there any chance of seeing an outright repeal of this onerous bill in the legislature this year, as there remains a number of what they term unintended consequences that are negatively impacted by AB 5?
The short answer is no. There is zero chance that AB 5 will be repealed, mainly because labor is strongly in support of keeping AB 5 intact. In fact, they're not happy about the changes that have already been made. And keep in mind, there were a few exemptions that were made. One of them was for the press. And honestly, I will tell you that the only reason any changes were made was because it affected the press. Because once the media realized, wait a minute, this is going to affect our industry, then they started writing about it and really sounding the alarm, which brought attention to it, which allowed us to make some changes to AB 5. But there is, again, I'm being candid with you, there is zero chance that AB 5 is going to be repealed. Our best hope is that we are able to get some more bills through that, exempt some more industries. But I mean, that was a big battle just with Prop 22 on the ballot. I mean, they were so angry that someone dared to go against them and then got the proposition passed by the voters. So that tells you that the appetite is there for Californians if they, if they understand what the issue is. But we can't, so a lot of these industries, they don't have the resources to put something on the ballot, nor can they afford really to wait 2 years for the next election to get something on the ballot to exempt them. But I will be perfectly honest, there is no way they're going to allow a repeal of AB 5, certainly not with this particular governor in office, because they firmly believe that it is better for California and the planet, frankly, that every employee is unionized rather than work as an independent contractor. I mean, that is their goal. In fact, the chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee, who is the author of AB 5, she said that on camera on a TV news station in San Diego, that her preference would be that every employee was unionized. So you have to remember that when you have this conversation, that that is the goal, that everybody is a member of the union. And we know that independent contractors certainly don't want that. So this is going to take a big push from the average Californian of saying, no, this is not something that we're going to put up with.
Thank you for that unfortunate answer. I think we all knew that.
Sorry.
Was coming, but yeah, thank you. Got a question here specific for Assembly Member Elect Seyarto. Forestry management seems to be a critical component of wildfire mitigation. Given your extensive background as a firefighter, what advice will you have when you go to Sacramento to help our state better plan to manage our forests and mitigate catastrophic wildfires?
Well, my advice would be to stop fighting about why it is the way it is and start doing something about it. The management of fuels out there has been an growing issue for the last 20 years that I've been in the fire service, and going out on more and more strike teams over the years because of the growing issue of these wildfires, and also just the ferociousness that they're burning. A couple of years ago in Thousand Oaks, there was a fire there. Having worked a few days in the Malibu, Calabasas area, that was my worst fear, was if there's something that starts up on the north end and we got the Santa Ana winds blowing, there is nothing you can do between there and the ocean to stop it, because people don't want their beautiful areas that are left to be, refuge areas, basically, and wildlife areas. They don't want anybody to go in there and do anything to disturb it. And the problem is we've gotten so good at preventing them for all those years that this fuel buildup has become a real problem, and as has the forestation issues. I would encourage, one of the things that I would be very encouraging of is, the federal government last September, I think I remember listening to the governor talk about the federal government is finally going to work with the state government and local agencies to start doing something about the forest management. And Southern California Edison has a forest area that they actually own and have been doing some successful forest management. And the rate of burn and the damage that was done in the area that they have been doing this in was far less than the areas that they hadn't gotten to yet. And that was up in the Shaver Lakes area. And so we have to come to grips with, stop fighting about whether you think it's climate change or you think it's not enough rain or whatever it is, and start doing something about the things that we can do immediately, which is, start developing more of those, we have prison inmate crews that can go out and help do a lot of brush clearing and things like that. And just getting the dead brush. If we just use Murrieta as an example, we have a lot of open space areas that we, as we let houses be built, these were incorporated in just for that purpose. So people had open space. But if you go through there, there's overgrowth, there's dead limbs, there's all sorts of stuff that should actually be cleared out so that those open spaces stay safe for the neighborhoods and still give them the aesthetic beauty that they want. And we're not allowed to do that. And so we get the overgrowth, we get a fire, and then those fires are so ferocious that they go right into the neighborhoods. So there is a lot of things that we can do proactively to start, well, now we're reactive, but from here on out that we can do to make those things go away or to help mitigate those. And we're just not doing them. And that's what the conversation needs to be, is what do we do right now about it? And there's plenty of answers out there. Get with the fire service, get with the feds, figure that out, and move forward on a plan. So, and I just wanted to touch on something that Melissa had talked about a little earlier, the senator, with respect to AB5 and all those other things. What we need our citizens to do is to recognize how bad this imbalance in California is for them. And because they're the only ones that are going to be able to fix this in the long run by putting people in place and rebalancing California, that we have people that aren't so beholden that they just, and so protected that they can do anything that they want. And that's what we have right now. And that has to end, because all of the other issues, including this one, hinge on us being more balanced and having those checks and balances.
Thank you, Kelly, which brings me to what will probably be our last question this morning. And this will be for Mr. Zaremberg. The California Chamber of Commerce has built a enviable legislative and lobbying organization over the past few decades, actually starting with your leadership of the advocacy program nearly 30 years ago. Those weekly lobbyist calls that you do are most informative. The support structure you have in place for local advocacy has been very effective, and we certainly thank you for that. But California remains one of the least business-friendly states in the country year after year, with regulatory and tax pressures seeming to only get worse. I think last session, I believe you had 19 bills on the CalChamber job killer list, while your website does not show a single job creator bill having been introduced this past session. Your annual year-end report shows that Republicans overwhelmingly, and there was one lonely Democrat senator who voted 80% or more with CalChamber positions. It's about the same ratio in the Assembly. The open primary was supposed to bring more centrists and moderates to the legislature, but that doesn't appear to have happened. So obviously, we're doing our part down here by electing business and housing-friendly candidates like Senators Melendez and Morell, Assembly members like Marie Waldron and now Kelly Seyarto, but we can't do it alone. What can be done, do you think, Allan, to get more business-friendly candidates elected to Sacramento? Because as Kelly pointed out, that's really going to be kind of the linchpin of getting some of these things done, is to achieve a more moderate and balanced approach to legislation out of Sacramento. And you folks are right there in the center of it.
Well, all those are absolutely accurate questions. If we had 40 senators like Senator Melendez, California would be much more responsive to what the plights of the businesses are. I talked about this diversity. We have to be able to, and unfortunately, be able to work with the majority party to be able to find solutions. This pointing out that we had a couple job creators, but the job creators that we're able to get through the legislature are insignificant. The job creators, and we're really in a situation where we need to be able to stop the worst of the worst and make sure those don't continue to happen. And one onerous one that's going to apply additional family leave to small businesses did pass on the last night of the session. And so to the point, it's a very good example of that the reason it passed is because the administration, the governor, made it part of the budget negotiations and said, if you want this, we need to get that bill passed. And we almost had it stopped in the Senate. I'm sorry, my other phone's going off here. So, and I can't stop it. Call from 815-373. Okay, I'll come back on. We were able to get many of the Democrats to oppose it. And like I said, it passed on the last night with 2 minutes to go because the leadership got involved because the governor's office said, you cut a deal with us. We do have the ability to have some success. We cannot get 40 Senator Melendez elected in California. That's just not the demographics of California. But what we have to do is to be able to cultivate the issues that you talk about, the issues that are important, and be able to show the rest of the majority party that that's what the constituents want. When we get a representative like a Senator Hurtado from the Central Valley, who came from a different background, but is willing to say, I want to protect jobs in my community. That's what we have to foster. We have to be able to develop that. And I would say that if we didn't have the ability to have to elect moderate Democrats where they run against Democrats in general elections, we would, I think, probably be in worse shape. And that person that was 80%, the one Democrat, is Steve Glazier. And his race cost $10 million against another Democrat for one state Senate race, but we won that. And so it's getting the business community to engage when there's a pro-business Republican against a not pro-business Democrat. We need to support that pro-business Republican. When there's a pro-business Democrat against a not pro-business Democrat, we need to support the pro-business one. It takes resources. We need to be organized. And, I hate to say this, but, the disparity in the ability to raise resources is, and Senator Melendez pointed this out about on AB 5, that the unions are so strongly opposed to changing any changes there, that we need to be able to compete with that. That's what we have to compete with. And we need to get more resources from the business community. And I have to tell you, for companies that do a lot of business here that are out-of-state companies, they're different than you are because they're not here to change the face of politics in California. They're here to do business regardless of who's involved. And for the people who reside here, the people who are members of the California business community that live here, they need to be involved, to be active, to support their legislature, but to also be able to support to make changes throughout the rest of the state when we do have races where we can make a difference. And I think that's where we need to elect the best possible people who reflect your community's interest, regardless of whether they're in San Francisco or in San Diego. So yes, that's a challenge. And I would ask that everybody be part of that challenge to be able to support pro-business legislators, regardless of where they are throughout the state. And so thanks for having me to be part of this. You know, and like I said, my job I probably wouldn't have a job if there were 40 Senator Melendez's in the Capitol. They wouldn't need me. So that would be, but I thank you for having me to be part of the discussion.
Well, thank you for joining us, sir. And as you pointed out, and I think one of our early House speakers in the state of California back in the 60s, Jess Unruh, pointed it out the best when he coined the term that money is the mother's milk of politics. And that's certainly what it takes when you can run a Senate race in the state and it costs you $10 million. We're talking real money there at this point. So I would like to thank you all, Senator Melendez. Thank you all. Assembly Member Elect Kelly Seyarto. We will look forward to working with you over the next years and hope that you're able to accomplish great things, both for our state and certainly for our region. President Zaremberg, we thank you as always for coming down and being part of this. We hope that in the future we'll be able to once again get together in public. This has always been a highlight of the Temecula Valley Chamber's legislative year, and we thank them and their sponsorship, as well as the other sponsors that we mentioned earlier, and the City of Temecula. But thanks in particular to Brooke over at the Temecula Valley Chamber of Commerce for all her hard work and the committee that put this together. This concludes our program this morning. The recording of this webinar will be available on the Chamber's YouTube channel. And we thank you all attendees for being part of the 2020 Legislative Summit. We look forward to seeing you again in the future. Thank you all. Now let's go out and do some business. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thanks.